Seasonal events are a huge part of Terraria, or at least they used to be. As of right now, there are only 2 seasonal events in Terraria, Halloween and Christmas, but there used to be a total of 6 or 7. Most of the seasonal events were only available on the old mobile and console versions of Terraria, so many people either won't remember them or didn't get to experience them in the first place, but we will be talking about those events later in the video. For now though, I kinda want to discuss the events which are already in the game, starting with the one and only Halloween. In terms of straight up content, I think that Halloween is definitely the most impactful event in Terraria, which is a shame to me because I think Christmas is a way better holiday. The Halloween event adds a ton of stuff, like different enemies in the overworld during the day and the night, like the bunny slime during the day and these crazy different zombies during the night, but more importantly it adds stuff like goodie bags, which can give you a wide variety of crazy cool vanity sets. The robot set, the pumpkin set, the vampire set, the unicorn set, there are so many fantastic and cool vanity items which you can only get during Halloween. While this stuff doesn't have a huge impact on the game, it is still very cool to be able to get this kind of stuff, especially because it comes from a specific time and day. Obviously, if you want to, you can just change your internal clock, but I feel like that kind of takes away from the specialness. While the Pumpkin Moon is not technically only available during Halloween, I would definitely associate it with this event. The Pumpkin Moon is an absolutely phenomenal event in Terraria. I'm not exaggerating when I'm saying that aside from the Frost Moon, it is by far the best event in the entire game. It's kind of a low bar because Terraria isn't known for having amazing events, but the Pumpkin Moon is just fantastic. From the gameplay loop to the boss fights to the items that you can obtain. The Raven Staff is a really cool summoner item, and it's not necessarily mandatory, but I would say that for this stage of the game, it's the most easily accessible broken weapon when you're playing summoner. The Horseman's Blade is a little bit underwhelming, but I would say that's a pretty decent weapon nonetheless, and the Dark Harvest is possibly the best whip at this stage of the game as well. The Pumpkin Moon is absolutely essential if you're going through a summoner class playthrough. From the Necromantic Scroll to Spooky Wood to the Raven Staff and the Dark Harvest, you just cannot pass up this event as an opportunity. It is so useful. Although if you are going for something like Ranger or even Magic, you don't really need the event. While Halloween is very cool to a lot of people and it's a great event as a whole, I can't help but say that I prefer Christmas. Christmas is my favorite seasonal event in Terraria by far for a variety of reasons. Present slimes will spawn everywhere, as well as stuff like Santa bunnies, and a lot of these enemies can drop presents. Now what you can actually obtain from these presents isn't usually that good. You can get the snow globe, the candy cane hook, the candy cane sword, but all of that stuff is only really useful early in the game, so if it's Christmas time around hard mode or you're late into the game, it's kinda useless. You still have some useful building blocks like pine trees and candy cane blocks, which can really add to that Christmassy feel, but if it's not December, you're probably gonna take this stuff down anyway. The real standout for the Christmas event is, of course, the Frost Moon. Simply put, the Frost Moon is the best event in Terraria as a whole. It has some of the best boss fights in the game, really good music, and some of the best drops as well. While the Pumpkin Moon is really essential if you're playing with Summoner or maybe Melee, the Frost Moon is really essential if you're playing with Magic. The Razor Pine is not only a really neat weapon, but it's possibly one of the most viable weapons in the entire game as a whole. And even the Blizzard Staff, while doing a lot less damage, is a really fun weapon to use. So if you're playing something like Classic Mode or Expert Mode where you don't need the best weapons possible, I would often go for the Blizzard Staff just because it's a lot more fun. Festive Wings are also a really nice addition to the game because by this point late into the game you'll probably need slightly better wings, and this is a way for you to obtain them while not having to go out of your way. And the event itself is just fun, man. Like the Ice Queen and Santa NK1 and Everscream are actually fun enemies to fight, and everything else, while irritating, poses a very fun challenge. To be fair, the Pumpkin Moon is basically on the same level when it comes to fun. The Pumpkin Moon has great boss fights and interesting enemies as well, but I just feel like the drops are what make the Frost Moon better to me. The Frost Moon is not the only Christmas event in Terraria though. You also get access to the Frost Legion, one of the only pre-hard mode events in the game, and also one of the least interesting. There are literally 3 enemies that come out of this event: Mr. Stabby, the Snowman Gangsta, and Snowballa. It's funny, but I mean, come on, come on. It's one of those things where you do it once, you go, that was pretty cool, and then you never do it again. At least the Frost Moon and the Pumpkin Moon and a few of the other invasions like the Solar Eclipse actually have their own music. This event doesn't even get its own music, so it's got nothing going for it. Very underwhelming. But as a whole, aside from the Frost Legion, I think that the Christmas event event in Terraria is phenomenal. In my opinion, it is by far the coolest and most interesting seasonal event in the entire game. But we aren't done yet, because like I mentioned earlier in the video, there are 5 entirely different seasonal events worth talking about which have simply been removed for the game or stuck in the 3DS version, which nobody plays. These events had a much smaller impact on the game and barely changed anything, so we're going to be doing a quick overview, not going into detail, but taking a quick look at these older events. Valentine's Day was a February exclusive event in the game which had 3 unique items. The first one was the Broken Heart, which spawned the pet Cupid. It's a pretty cool pet, very interesting, and honestly I don't know why they got rid of it from the game. He's pretty cool. It also adds heart arrows, which on the surface seem like a really cool idea because they can stun enemies every now and then, but when you actually put it into practice in something like a boss fight, these arrows don't really do anything. The idea of an arrow that can stun enemies is actually really cool, and I hope they add something like that in the future, but it just wasn't really that good with the heart arrows. And the final update that came from this event is the Valentine Ring, an item where if you give it to another player will give them very interesting and cool buffs. Unfortunately, I did not have another player to give it to, so I can't really show you what it does. The next seasonal event to talk about is Easter, which as you would expect summons throughout the month of April, and honestly I would say it's more appropriate to call it April Fools. The only thing this event adds is the boss fight Lepus. This boss fight is not cool, it's not fun, it is funny because it's a good troll boss if you want to annoy your friends, but it doesn't do anything, it doesn't drop anything good. I remember I loved to troll my brother by spawning this guy on his early worlds during April. It was a great way to crash mobile worlds, but it's not really a interesting boss fight if you actually look at it from a game design perspective. But Lepus will always have a place in my heart as that one funny troll mechanic that was in Terraria for a little bit and got removed very quickly. And then we have Thanksgiving, which was also an event that only added one boss fight, Torkor the Ungrateful, but to be fair, this boss fight is a lot more impactful than Lepus. This was a real boss fight. It didn't drop anything fantastic, but it was actually pretty fun to go through this and engage with the battle. The footage I'm showing you is from a mod, but even on the original mobile and console versions, Torkor the Ungrateful was a pretty decent boss fight. You have to remember that all of the boss fights in Terraria, like the Empress of Light and Moonlord and Duke Fishron and all of that, weren't really a huge part of Terraria at the time. So all you had to look forward to was these weird bizarro bosses like Torkor, but hey, they contributed to the game, I'm not gonna lie. Torkor, pretty good boss fight. And last but not least, we had St. Patrick's Day, which was of course a super rare event because St. Patrick's Day is very rare, but what we did get from this event was one pet, the Leprechaun, summoned with the Pot of Gold, and you know, he's a pet, he's cool looking. That's about it. Honestly, these events were fantastic and I wish they weren't removed from a lot of the older versions of the game, but don't worry, from now on I'm gonna be moving to 3DS Terraria. I know it doesn't have as much content, but it has Lepus, and that's all I need.